That I'm going to get out of the way. So here's what I'll tell you, because I don't want to be that pastor like preaches a sermon before the sermon, right? Everybody always did that to me. Yeah, Ronnie said too late. So here's what I'll tell you. Actually, dude, we're doing good on time, all right? So here we go. Hey, I'm sorry that I think Easter is important, guys, okay? You know what? That's fine. You guys don't think it's cool, whatever. No, I'm just going to sit down and shut up, all right? No, I'm just kidding. But hey, Valerie's going to come up. She's going to share with you, continue our series looking at Jesus called This Is Jesus, going through the Gospel of Mark. And man, we've had such a good time in this series. Here's what I'll tell you. Valerie told me this little secret. She might even act like it's not true. She loves when people talk to her while she's preaching. Loves it. She's going to act like she doesn't. She's going to say things like, you're going to throw me off. You're going to say, no. She loves it. And so I came up with this new saying, because a lot of people will say things like amen and hallelujah, but like, come on. We're Innovation Church. Let's innovate a little bit, do something new. And so my line today, you might hear, I might say it. Who knows? Who knows? Valerie's like, please don't say it. I'm just going to sit over here and be like, tell me how that truth tastes. And I'm just going to yell things like that the whole time, all right? So, hey, with that being said, would you guys do me a favor? Show some honor to Valerie. Let's clap it up for her as she comes forward.
Oh, my. Well, I am super excited to get this opportunity to share with you guys today. I do have a little bit of a cold, so I'm sorry if I cough or sneeze, or you never know what could happen. I could cry. I mean, things just happen, especially when you're pregnant. Crazy things happen. But no, like Pastor Anthony said, you know, we've been in a series called This Is Jesus. And this past month, we've been in the book of Mark. This morning, I'm going to twist it a little bit to call it This Is You and Jesus. This morning, I want to talk about some different accounts that are in here where the Lord, where Jesus takes his time with his people. You know, so often when we look at Mark and we look in the Gospels, when we see and hear things through the Bible, so often we put a separation between us and Jesus. So often we think, yeah, he's preaching to the crowds, he's preaching to the multitudes. Well, this morning, I want to break that separation, and I want you to picture you and Jesus this morning, just you and him. So I want to share a funny story. I don't even know if Brandon's ever heard this story. This is from when I was in junior high. It's a little story a moment that I had with Jesus. So we're going back to junior high for me. I think I was either 7th or 8th grade. We had a junior high pastor at our church at the time who I love dearly, still love dearly. And they, obviously we went on trips, like you do in youth groups. You go to places, you go away. Well, it was fall time and we went away to a place and it was in Toledo and it was called a Hell House. I don't know it's a Christian thing. I don't know if anybody it's a Christian thing usually put on by a church, but it's basically, they may be called something different, they may not even do them anymore, but what happens is you go into usually a church, sometimes they're outdoors, but they kind of put on a play for you in a way, and they create different scenarios for you of what's going on in the generation today, whether it's bullying, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol. So you walk through these rooms and you're going through these different scenes and they portray different things that are going on for you. And in the end, you go through hell and then you go to heaven in the end. So it sounds crazy. I promise it's not. Well, you'll hear my story. So my story was a little crazy, but usually the outcome was very well for people, and you would see people coming out with their lives changed and teenagers being radically changed because they would see these things happening in front of them. And then there was always people there at the end praying with teenagers and all that type of stuff. So anyways, my story was, I was a little scared to begin with, didn't know what to expect, didn't know what was going to happen, right? And so we walk in and we start going through these different scenes, and some of them they were pretty graphic in what they were talking about, not necessarily what they were showing, but what they were trying to portray. So we went through several different scenes, and it was at the one scene where my friend next to me actually passed out. So because it was just the type of scene that we were in at the time. I don't even necessarily remember what scene it was, but so I went through a couple more, and I just was starting to get really nervous and really anxious. And so I turned to my friend, I said, listen, I'm not going through this next one. Like, I'm done. I'm out. let's go somewhere. And so we told our youth pastor, we're like, we got to get out of this place. So we go out, we go sit in the chairs, and then I started getting really overwhelmed and like super nervous and scared and like, what'd I just do? Why'd I walk out? So of course I started crying and like, because like, just the different things that were going on, and I was in a place that I wasn't aware of, all this stuff, right? So at that moment, that was when all the volunteers and all the people there got super excited because they're thinking, oh my goodness, we got one. Right? So they all start coming to me with all these like pamphlets and all these different things of like, do you love Jesus and are you a Christian? And like starting about all these, do you have sin in your life and all this stuff? And I'm like, oh, okay, like that's not why I walked out. Like my friend's sitting next to me, like, no, she loves Jesus. Like we just got scared and walked out. Like, no big deal, right? So obviously I was super emotional and having a rough time with it all. And so then finally my youth pastor, she came out and she's like, hey, like y'all can back up, like it's okay. You don't need to be around her. So they ended up taking us straight to the heaven scene, which is wonderful. We got to go right into heaven, walked right in. They had, they had this whole place like all in white, and there was a Jesus there, and there were angels dancing, and it was a little elaborate and kind of cheesy in a way, but you get what they were trying to do. So obviously I was still a mess. I was like crying and like just wanted to leave, wanted to be done. So there was Jesus walking around talking to everybody. And the whole time he had a rose in his hand, right? So at the very end, he finished and he came to, I was like in the middle somewhere. He came to me and he handed me the rose. Sounds funny. I fully understand that that was not Jesus coming and handing me the rose. But at that moment, I was really struggling. I was really feeling lousy on myself for walking out, felt like I did something wrong, felt like I should have been bold enough in my faith to be able to walk through those and stand firm in those. And so in that moment, I felt like Jesus met me. I walked out of there feeling a lot better about myself because I felt that Jesus met me in that moment. So I say that to say that even in crazy moments of our lives, Jesus will meet us. Jesus will find us. We just have to be open. So we're going to go through a couple different accounts in Mark here where Jesus meets specific people, and he finds and he seeks out specific people. And then at the end, we're going to go through what's really become one of my favorite stories of the Bible, I believe. But just so you all know, these chairs are up here for a purpose, and I'm not like calling up volunteers, so don't be like worried the whole time that like I'm going to call somebody up here to come up here and sit, even though Brandon was super excited for it. As he was setting it up, he's like, oh, pick me, pick me. I'm like, I'm not calling anybody up. There'll be a reason for these chairs at the end. But we are going to start off in Mark chapter 7. Starting in verse 31. So Jesus left Tyre and went up to Sidon before going back to the Sea of Galilee and the region of the 10 towns. A deaf man with a speech impediment was brought to him, and the people begged Jesus to lay his hands on the man to heal him. Jesus led him away from the crowd so they could be alone. He put his fingers in the man's ears. Then spitting on his own fingers, he touched the man's tongue. Looking up to heaven, he sighed and said, "Ephphatha," which means be opened. Instantly the man could hear perfectly, and his tongue was freed so he could speak plainly. Sorry. So my favorite verse in there, and the verse that I want to point out, is verse 33, because it says, Jesus led him away from the crowd so they could be alone. I believe fully in that moment that Jesus knew what that man needed. Now, granted, if you look at his situation, he was deaf. And if they were in a huge crowd of people and the Lord opened his ears, that would be pretty shocking for that man. If he was in a crowd of all these people around him and all this yelling, and then boom, he could hear and he was miraculously healed, that would be very, very, very intense for somebody. But I truly believe that the Lord knew where that man was at in his life. So this morning, as I read these and as we go in these, I want you to picture yourself, because that's what I've done as I have been reading this over and over and over again, all these different accounts where Jesus takes people away. I want you to picture yourself. I want you to picture that time where Jesus takes everything else aside. He pushes it all away. And he took that man and he walked away with him. Could you picture that happening? Could you picture being in the crowd and seeing something like that? Where's he going? What's he doing? What's happening? Why is he doing that? Because Jesus was taking a moment with his child, with his son, to go meet him. There's something so special about that when I think about that. When we think about, all that Jesus has done in the Gospels, all his teachings and all his preachings to the crowds and to the multitudes, and we think that's so often what we think about is huge crowds and all these people and all these followings with Jesus. But I love to think about the moments where Jesus takes his children and he takes his people. And he finds those intimate moments with them. So we're going to move on to a different one. It's actually in Mark 8. And it is it's chapter 8, verse 22. When they arrived at Bethsaida, some people brought a blind man to Jesus, and they begged him to touch the man and heal him. Jesus took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. Then, spitting on the man's eyes, he laid his hands on him and asked him, "Can you see anything now?" The man looked around. "Yes," he said, "I see people, but I can't see them very clearly. They look like trees walking around." Then Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes again, and his eyes were opened. His sight was completely restored, and he could see everything clearly. So here again is another moment when so much is going on around them, so much is happening. So many healings and so many people are around them, but Jesus took the blind man by the hand and he led him out of the village. He took time because he knew where that man was at. We may not even know exactly where that man was at in his life. But maybe he knew that he needed that moment with Jesus, that maybe if there were crowds, maybe if there were people all around, that it wouldn't have been as special or it couldn't have happened the way that it needed to happen, but Jesus knew how it needed to happen. How many times in our lives do we just need Jesus? How many times do we have a bad day, or do we have a rough time at work or at school or with our family or with our children or whatever it might be, where we so easily want to resort to other things, or we just want to go to bed, or we just want to get away or something? How many times do you think that those moments or those things in our lives will be resolved if we just got away with Jesus? If we just let him lead us out of the village, lead us out of the crowds and the multitudes and all the craziness that may be going on in our lives? How many times does that happen? I encourage you to think about it, to let that become a part of you in your life. We're going to move on to Mark 13 now. And this is the part that I absolutely love. This is the part that truly changed my life. And believe me when I say that, each week when Pastor Anthony is up here, or when Emily is up here, or when anybody is up here preaching, or any preachers out there, don't ever think or don't ever have the thought process that everything that we do or that we share is only for you guys. But believe me when I say that the Lord truly changes our life through what he shows us each and every week. That even though it may be the same type of things or the same type of scriptures, but each and every time, like I could have read this 100 times, but when I read this over these last couple weeks, it changed my life. What I read, what I saw, it changed my life. So don't ever think that by what we do or by what we share or our hearts that we're not being changed, because we are. Totally being changed. So, Mark 13, verse 3. It says, "Later, Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives across the valley from the temple. Peter, James, John, and Andrew came to him privately and asked him, 'Tell us when all this will happen. What sign will show us that all these things are about to be fulfilled?'" Now, I'm not about to read the rest of Mark 13 because that would be a lot. But I can set up a little bit what's happening. So throughout the book of Mark, you see that Jesus has been preparing his people for his betrayal, for his death. And so here, some of his disciples stop him and say, Jesus, will you sit down and tell us what's going to happen? What is about to happen? You keep talking about it, but what is really going to happen here? And so this is the moment when I picture there could be so much going on. And he sits down with his men and he begins to tell them some pretty terrible things that are about to happen with the world and with families and with homes and with lives and with death and betrayals, all these different things that are about to happen. And then in verse 9, so you can only imagine his men sitting there and saying, oh my goodness, like, this is crazy. This is insane. This is all about to happen. And their heads being so consumed with all this. And in all of that Jesus is telling him, even though it may be overwhelming, even though it may be intense, he says in verse 9, he says, but this will be your opportunity to tell them about me. So even though all this destruction and all these things may begin to happen in the world and in their lives, he says, but let this be your opportunity. So can you imagine this morning, having Jesus sitting here and being one of those men and sitting down and listening to Jesus? Can you picture that? All these things that he is telling you, all these things that's going on in the world. And he sits here and he's the one telling them, and he looks them in the eye and he says, but let this be your opportunity. How many times in our life, like I said before, where we just need to get away with Jesus? You know, we come to him with all these things going on in our lives, right? We come to him with family issues, with financial issues, with maybe needing healings, maybe needing whatever it might be. Maybe you're a teacher. But this morning, I want you to bring those things to your Father. Bring those things to Jesus this morning. And literally picture yourself sitting away from the crowds, away from the people, and sitting with Jesus, and sitting in this seat, and letting him tell you those things. Even though all these crazy things may be happening in your life, they may not be the easiest, they may not be the prettiest. But in that, could you imagine Jesus looking at you and saying, but this will be your opportunity. But this will be your opportunity. Whatever that might be, whatever it may be in your life, that would be your opportunity. Maybe, I'm sorry, I need a drink. That would be your opportunity. Maybe to find more strength in him. Maybe to find more faith in him. He's saying, lean on me. Let this be your opportunity to grow in me. Maybe be your opportunity to fall more in love with me. Emily, if you want to come up and start playing. What is it this morning in your life? What is it that you're faced with this morning? And listen, it's not like you can't come to Jesus, or you can come to Jesus and you can only bring him one thing. And you're like, well, I guess I'll use this one today. And then tomorrow you say, well, maybe tomorrow I'll bring him this one. No, you can bring everything that you have going on in your life. Every single thing that you have. You can bring them to your time with Jesus. Bring them to him. Don't be afraid of the crowds. Don't be afraid of the multitudes. Don't be afraid of everything going on in your life, but bring it to him and find the opportunity that he wants to give you in that. Because there is one. I promise you there is one. It may be learning. It may not be the easiest. But the greatest thing about it is that it is him and you that is is dealing with it, that is walking through it, that is going through the process, that you're not alone in it. You're not sitting out in the crowd. You're not just another person that he's just preaching to, and it's what's happening in the moment. But no, it is an intimate moment with you and your Father, with you and Jesus. So find whatever it is this morning. You know, if you literally have to separate yourself, if you literally have to get away with Jesus, for me, I literally have to picture myself going on a walk, just me and him, just sitting in a room with me and him, with him sitting in front of me, and me just pouring everything out to him. When was the last time that you sat alone with your Father? When was the last time that you brought everything to him? Gave him your fears, gave him your worries, gave him your troubles, and not worried about what everything else was going on. Because the crazy thing is that he's waiting, he's ready, and he's willing. That's who he is, because he's a good, good Father. He's not going to come and he's not going to sit there and say, well, I guess, since you got all this going on, I guess there's some stuff I can do, and I guess there's some stuff I can work out here for you. No. He sits there and he looks you in the eyes and he says, it's going to be okay. He may wrap his arms around you. That's who our Father is. That's who your Father is. So this morning, I know I'm ending a little early, but I want us to take a little bit of time this morning. I want you to take a little bit of time this morning to think about where you are with the Lord. Are there things in your life that you need to just come and sit with him? Are there things that you need to just bring to him? Be a father, because there's opportunities that he has for you. There are things that he has for you. There are incredible things, but sometimes there's some stuff that we got to get through to get to those things, and getting through it may not be the easiest. I think of different people in here in Mark and through the whole Bible. I think of the woman with the issue of blood, how she tried. She knew she had to get to Jesus. She did everything in her power that she could, even though people would look at her, even though people would be shocked and not be happy with it. She knew that she had to get to Jesus somehow. This morning, if you need to get to Jesus, then get to him. Because he's there, he's here. He is with arms wide open. And he knows it, he feels it, he understands it. So this morning, find your opportunity with the Lord, whatever it might be in your life. If everybody wants to go ahead and stand, I'm going to have Emily and Kati go to a song called Good, Good Father. I want us just to take a few moments with him this morning. This time and this intimacy that you may have with your Father, it may be something that happens later. It may be something that happens in the morning with him when you spend time with him. But it could be something that happens right here in this moment. So, Father, we open up our hearts to you. Jesus, we are longing for that moment with you, where you take us away, where you walk with us, where you talk with us, where you look us in the eye and say it's all going to be okay. Father, may that happen this morning. May we go away with you, Father. God, whatever that looks like in our life, whatever we may need to bring to you this morning, God, we bring bring it to you. Whatever it looks like in our lives. It may be family, it may be children, it may be work, it may be school, it may be financial issues, whatever it might be in our lives. Jesus, we want to walk away. We want to walk away with you this morning, Jesus. We want to find the opportunities that you have for us to grow, to strengthen. Father, may we take a few moments and do that with you this morning.